Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Won't you be our neighbor? It's the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Welcome to the second episode of season 4. We're super thrilled to have you. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're super glad to have you back for another episode. Our one of our annual episodes.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that
it's the third annual Altskers ceremony. This episode we are going to be talking about the Academy Awards, the 96th Academy Awards, I want to say, maybe? 92nd, not quite 96th. 92nd Academy Awards, which of course happened 14 years ago. Yeah, almost a year ago now.
Yeah, back in the movies from 2019, and it happened in 2020, and now here we are in 2021, and we're going to talk about them. Because you can see them, a lot of them now.
We've seen a lot of them. Joel just saw all of them pretty much yesterday almost.
I did kind of go.
You've been marathoning the Oscar films from last year.
Yeah, I had a fun.
And I did something similar during my Christmas break, so some of these are pretty fresh movies to me too.
It was really great to have some time available and to be able to find all of these movies, to watch them, to have some. I haven't binged movies like this in a very, very long time, and frankly, I don't think especially since like Best Picture nominees have been expanded to however
up to 10 films.
I don't think that I have been fully literate since they expanded. There's always one.
I certainly haven't for the Oscars in some time, but here we are a year later and we both pretty much are. We have a bunch to talk about.
Yeah.
It's funny, this show and our next couple of year in review shows, but this show in particular, it's really going to be weird. Last year, I didn't think it felt so weird to be reviewing the Oscars a whole year later. And the first year, I really didn't think it was strange. But when the Oscar ceremony happened, Valentine's Day-ish of last year, that fall award season, it's just such a lifetime ago with everything that's happened in the world and the COVID outbreak. These movies are weird to think back on in another time.
Yeah.
And I'm just, there's nothing to be done about that, but I'm just sort of acknowledging that when we go back to last October releases and stuff, it's not just this October behind us, it's the whole year behind that. And that seems further away than ever. So we're sorry for how we format these, but we think it'll still be an interesting show anyway.
It just occurred to me to think this was, I believe this was the first year, we had a movie that was released on Netflix, that was released on a streaming platform first. It was the first time that that was nominated. That was part of the Academy Awards, and what we all talk about. Well,
it's not the first Netflix. It's not the first Netflix movie that was nominated, but and even for these awards, the the Netflix film still premiered in the
That's
theater.
right.
So
That's
that they
right.
could
That's right. Yeah,
qualify.
they did. Yeah, I'm remembering that now.
But
They did.
But we'll get to them. I don't want to name them because I don't want to spoil this for anyone who it may be a surprise to still somehow. But you know, it this Oscar season had heavy hitters from Netflix, and that really was new. Netflix was right in there with Sony Pictures Classics and
Yeah.
Fox Searchlight and all the big boutique companies that released the big Oscar bait films. And that was different, and that's never going away because this year, for obvious reasons, the Oscars aren't being held until April, which I don't know why. I don't know why wait till April. It's not, things aren't going to be much better in April.
Yeah.
You're still not going to be able to pile into a theater and breathe on each other in April, I assure you. But whatever, they're giving their best shot to have an actual Oscar ceremony. But streaming films are on board for this season, and they said that may be temporary, but it's not temporary.
No.
You're not going to be able to pull the plug on that.
No.
And you're going to have, and it isn't just going to be Netflix, Apple TV movies. And I mean, you're just going to have this whole, it's changed everything basically. And COVID, whatever imbalance between streaming and theatrical exhibition was, the pandemic just it sped that up, like
right,
in a way that's tough to measure. It really sped it up by a decade, I think. So
yeah.
But
all right, well, let's jump in. Let's get to it. Let's do our 2020 Oscars.
I actually pretended in the first time we did this that I was putting on a bow tie and struggling with it. But that gag doesn't work quite the way it used to. Also, due to COVID,
yep,
we have that to thank for everything.
Yep. God, I can't even.
In any case, you're the bow tie guy.
I am the bow tie guy. That's it.
And I have to say, I still don't know how you tie those damn things.
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't know that I would have if I hadn't had to do it on stage during a show while saying lines in front of an audience. And so I'm like, I better become so good at this. And then afterwards, I'm like, you know what? I had to learn this, and I worked my butt off to learn this. I'm wearing them. I'm wearing them from here on out.
It's a good look for you. I look like a waiter.
Yeah,
you know?
I think now
you really do look like a guy who's, that's the look.
Now that I'm older, I think I wear them with a bit more confidence, and it feels like, oh, he did that on purpose, and not like, oh, he's doing that ironically. Because it's not.
Maybe I'll break out the piano tie at some point.
Oh, oof.
So next time we do a music related show.
That should those should come back. I don't think I still have my key tie.
It's kitsch. I'm sure you can go right to Amazon and buy your choice of 4 of them, probably.
That's true.
If you really lament the loss of that.
All right, so let's jump into some of we're going to get to obviously the best picture. The majority of our show today
is going to be talking about
Oscar
adjacent Oscar season films to talk about first.
And let's talk about the Academy Award winner for Best Performance by an Actress, and that is Judy, which won for Renee Zellweger.
Yeah.
And
Renee Zellweger winning her second Oscar, right? Didn't she win for Cold Mountain or something too? I guess we don't really have to look that up.
Yes, she did. Yes, she did win, but was it for Cold Mountain?
Or Chicago, maybe?
She went for Chicago. Yeah.
Well, just like Chicago, Renee Zellweger can sing, and that really helps her here. She does all the Judy Garland singing, of which there is a lot. She's not Judy Garland, obviously. Nobody who is really, but it's great. It really, really works. She plays an aged Judy Garland who's doing a string of Glory Day sort of concerts in London because she really, really needs the money. Um, it's interesting. It's a bit of like, this is sort of live theater trivia, but a young Tim Rice saw one of these concerts when he was a kid or an adolescent, or I'm not really sure, a very young person, and uh, and saw one of the bad ones. She was stoned and drunk pretty much the whole time she was in London, and she was a good enough performer that about half the time, maybe a little more than half the time, she went out there and nailed it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was a pretty high functioning alcoholic mother and performer at that point. But you, you can't do it every time. It incapacitates you to a certain degree. And she had some really, really bad shows, and Tim was at one of those bad shows. These are sort of legendary even before they made this movie, this story. Yeah. Which was what inspired him to write Evita, basically, because he thought that the power of watching somebody getting booed and heckled while they were singing like their signature song was just this thing that it is stuck in his subconscious for quite some time until he kind of knew what to do with it. And that's where both appearances of Don't Cry for Me, Argentina are basically based on Judy Garland breaking down while singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow in front of really unforgiving British audiences.
Yeah.
And the scene, not quite something that iconic, isn't actually in the movie, which is kind of weird. Mm-hmm. And there's been responses to it. Peter Allen wrote a song, said, "Quiet Please, there's a lady on the stage." That's about Judy, and just about give her a break. She's had it tough. And, that came years later, but it is an interesting bit of history. The film's pretty good. So if you're a Judy Garland fan, you should see it. If you're a Renee Zellweger fan, my goodness, you should definitely see it.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of a lost opportunity. All these flashbacks to her younger life when she's becoming a star, but not enough to really call it a parallel narrative, which is lamentable because those flashbacks are the best thing about the film, and they have nothing to do with old drunk Judy Garland. Or they show you the start of the road to get there, but I think you cast a star, you wanted to tell a certain story, and so you told that primarily, and that it's not bad, but it wears out its welcome a little bit. If they would have really shown half and half, it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to follow one character played by two different actors,
Yeah.
And I've seen it not go right before, or I've seen it like, well, this can only be so good if it's going to be. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about one of those in the coming weeks, but that's where the power was. The rise of a star during that era, how she was put upon and manipulated, and how she was treated as a young woman from the get-go, even though she had a lot of power, she just didn't really get it as a kid.
Right.
And just wanted, that mix of, when you're young, you even though your fantasy is a nightmare, you do sort of hang on to the positive aspects of it and show up to revel in those as much as you can, because it's what you think you wanted. And maybe it is what you wanted. I don't know.
When you're young, yeah. I mean, and when you're young, you want to please those around you. For the most part, you still want to please you. So even though
those flashback stories, to me, that actor, I can't remember her name, but those whole sequences were riveting in a way that the future or present Judy Garland days weren't. Mm-hmm. And I wish it was a better balance between the two. But if it was, we might not be talking about it here, because Judy Renee took home the Oscar, in what again was a pretty crowded field of really amazing talent.
Yeah, we had Renee Zellweger, Cynthia Erivo for Harriet, Scarlett Johansson for Marriage Story, Saoirse Ronan for Little Women, and Charlize Theron for Bombshell. Yeah, some heavy hitters there.
Although when I hear it, I'm like, and I'm not a huge Renee Zellweger fan, but when I hear that list, I'm like, yeah, they got it right.
Okay.
None of those other people were asked to do quite the thing that Renee has to do in Judy, and the fact that she, recreates a legendary person before our eyes in a fairly convincing fashion is pretty awesome.
Yeah, there over the last, I would say maybe 10 years or so, maybe not quite 10 years, but there's been a couple stage shows, like almost jukebox musicals of this very thing, where it's Judy Garland and these, like, I think one of them's called Beyond the Rainbow, one of them's called, I think, Judy at Carnegie Hall or something like that, and it's these older Judy performing, and then through that performance you sort of see it, they do flashbacks with other actors playing younger Judy. And so
there you go.
yeah, so
yeah,
I think
this is based on a book. I believe it's based on a biography.
Yeah.
Liza Minnelli and the surviving members of her family panned it and didn't support it, so it was sort of done without their help. But
yeah,
it really does feel like Judy Garland's getting a fair shake in the film, to be honest.
Well, that's
because she wasn't a tyrannical wreck, tearing up apartments or anything. She just was a sad lady who, the older she got, the tougher it was to control the substances she was dealing with. And that's really all it was.
Yeah.
So the film puts a sort of Hollywood ending on that, but I don't really begrudge it that.
Sure.
Because it's not really taking the easy way out from a filmmaking standpoint. It's trying to put a positive stamp on her life, which I can kind of appreciate.
Well, someone who in real life did not really get quite a fair shake. That's my segue. That's my kick butt segue for this one.
I think I know where you're going with this.
It's Richard Jewell, the movie directed by Clint Eastwood, about the man who unfortunately was at the heart of the Atlanta Olympic bombing story.
Yeah.
For this was another one. Unfortunately, I did not see it.
Richard Jewell, who was accused of being a self-manufactured hero / bombing terrorist when he was the first to see the bomb that went off that killed people at the Atlanta Olympics. And I gotta say, this story is really, really outstanding. This is the best Eastwood film I've seen in some time. It's not best picture worthy. There's nothing stylistic about it that knocks you out. It's very Eastwood. It's just extremely straightforwardly done, but it tells the story in this very real way, and it captures something about Richard where if you just, he went and did these interview shows and he seemed twitchy and weird because he was an odd guy, but a lot of it was just him getting into trouble. He was trying to ingratiate himself amongst the law enforcement people that were involved in this. And once the FBI had the idea that it might be him, they didn't really look at anything else. And then, here comes the press and forget it. It's all over. Right. And I don't know, Joel, I can't remember who did it. Do you remember who did the Atlanta bombing?
No, I don't.
And not everybody remembers Richard Jewell either way, but a tremendous amount of people do. And if you ask people, some of them to this day will not be clear on whether he did or did not plant that bomb. That's criminal because he saved people's lives when he found it. His understanding of what the procedures were and his like obsessive need to comply with those procedures when he found it, even when he wasn't being taken seriously on the site, saved who knows how many lives, hundreds of lives. It was buried under
Mhm.
this pavilion near a live concert setting where a concert was going on at the time. Uh, Sam Rockwell is fantastic in it. He plays his rather put upon lawyer. Um, but it's great. It's Aaron Sorkin-esque film, which for Eastwood is really, really different.
Mm.
Kathy Bates was nominated for an Oscar in it for playing his mom. She's spectacularly good. One of her best performances ever. And it just really does tell the story in a way. John Hamm plays the FBI guy who's going after him and single-minded about it, and he's great too. Somebody like him is needed in that role. Where if you'd have cast, I don't know, if you'd have cast an obvious villain, it wouldn't really work. Ham plays it great, so it's really good. Richard Jewell's really good. It's a conservative Clint Eastwood, praising a conservative gun-owning non-terrorist kind of lovable dork that Richard Jewell was, but it's worth it. He deserves it. He deserves more. Somehow, you just know when you smear a guy like that.
Yeah.
The way it sticks is alarming. And Eastwood said he's what he is. He's kind of weird and this and that, but
yeah,
what on the day he was a hero. And some people still think he did the bombing. It's criminal. It really is. So
right. Yeah. To be clear, he did not do the bombing. A man was arrested. I'm not going to say the man who was arrested.
Spoils the movie a little bit.
I don't want to, I don't want to, I don't want to
give him attention.
Yep, give him attention. But that person was arrested and is in jail for the rest of their lives. But yeah, Richard Jewell.
It's really good. I was expecting something obviously competent and decent.
Sure.
Olivia Wilde too. She represents the press in the movie. That's a harder role.
And that was a bit of the the off-screen controversy with it is the portrayal.
She plays a person who was a real person in life, but she's
they made an amalgam of a lot of people, and
she's an allegory for everything that was wrong about the press at the time. Yeah. Although even Eastwood tries to give her moments of humanity, and Olivia Wilde's a good actress, so she doesn't play her as a cartoon villain exactly. But if I were that person in real life and only did half of that stuff, I wouldn't like that either. So,
well, yeah,
that person is no longer with us, so is not even here to defend herself.
Right.
Conveniently. Still a good movie.
Let's go back to best actor or actress, best performance by an actress in a leading role. And the movie Harriet, with Cynthia Erivo, the sort of a more maybe more appropriate actiony film of Harriet Tubman.
When you look at Harriet's, because Harriet Tubman, I don't want to get too weird, but Harriet Tubman's a bit like Jesus in a way, as a literary figure and as a historical figure, or like John Lennon perhaps is closer, where we've sainted them, and because we've done that, we sort of show them as this statuesque, peaceful
of her going, "Come, slaves,
bringing justice."
Yes, I will slowly escort you, and everything will be all right.
Yes, let us all march to the sun, like the painting shows. Right. And that's, of course, that's not what it was like being a runaway slave at all, and it's not. It just doesn't touch on some of the highlights. Even military highlights ultimately of her career. This film really does put all of that front and center, which I think is great. It's really, really well made. Although it reminds me a little of Selma and a couple other movies that have tackled big historical figures. There was one with Idris Elba about Mandela that came out. it doesn't satisfy a lot of the needs of a human drama within the film. It really does feel, the biography really feels really well recreated, and that's kind of what they're pounding. And it pays lip service a little bit to the other things, but it's about Harriet Tubman, and the other movies about um, Nelson Mandela. The other film is about Martin Luther King Jr., and you don't feel like you get to know those people at all in any of these movies. You know what I mean? And this movie's like that, but they are all really, really good, and they all take a different look at the history by actually taking the history somewhat literally, which is refreshing. So it's a cool movie. I just didn't feel, I don't know, it's hard to explain it. It's a good movie, it has a lot of the same problems as Richard Jewell, though. There's one slave hunter character or whatever, and he's like the only one in the whole movie. It feels small and really allegorical, where you really would like it to be personal. She has some differences with her family, with her sister. She has a lot of issues with, being what she was, not an escaped slave so much, which made her an expert on all of this, but just as a woman, no matter how accomplished you are, you're even in that era, late 1800s, you're still a woman. You're still not taken seriously because of that.
Yep.
It demonstrates that really, really well. But I wish there was more of her in it. This is her as an action icon instead of a saintly, wondrous figure.
Yeah.
And that's appropriate. I thought it was awesome, but she's still very iconic, very untouchable. The film doesn't know what to do with her as a human, which is a bummer, but it's good anyway. Check it out. Harriet's a good film.
So again, speaking of someone who we have sort of sanctified, created as a sort of a beatific, almost a saintly figure. The movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. America's movie saint Tom Hanks as America's childhood teacher saint as Mr. Fred Rogers.
It's based on this true incident where this interviewer, journalist, was sent to interview Fred Rogers. It was a really good, controversial sort of gotcha journalist in that time. And his editor says at the beginning of the movie, this is the only guy who would allow himself to be interviewed by you. So you're doing this interview. It's a part of the assignment. You're doing it. So Matthew Rhys, right, plays, and it's they changed the name of the author. I mean, because the real guy is Tom Janot. It's based on a book and a real interview and a real guy, but they changed so much about the guy to give us what I was saying was missing from Harriet, to give us that real core of a human story by inventing one.
Because the story's about
there wasn't one.
The story's about the writer, not so much about, we're not seeing young Fred Rogers coming up in.
No, it's not system. A Fred Rogers biopic, although you learn a lot about him, which is really, really neat. Despite the film trying to show that he is a person and demonstrating it, I think, decently, there's nothing that the movie doesn't put the slightest dent in his sainthood, which is pretty much well earned by him, if anybody, in recent memory. But it's neat. It reenacts all these legendary moments from lore with lots of verisimilitude. The singing of the theme song on the subway, for example. Reese is great in the leading role of this guy who's, just an angry guy whose life is personal life is paying the toll because of it, and how Fred reaches him. And it's very strange, because
as we are the Fred Rogers we are introduced to in this, he is just, yeah, I mean, he's very much like that persona on that he had on TV. That's very similar to who he is in life, because that is how he has chosen to sort of deal with the stresses in his life, is to be as super kind and be this amazing listener
Right.
and everything. And
Right.
and yeah, and to have this totally damaged person as the that is sent there to interview him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really great.
It's a
Yeah,
it's a
there's
fantastic movie. It really is
yeah,
wonderful.
it's super wonderful. Yeah, Chris Cooper as the writer's dad is just is yeah, annoyingly great. How
Friend of friend of the show as Mrs. Rogers, who just passed away recently, is can't remember her name now. It's on the tip of
oh
my
my
tongue.
god, yes,
J.O. Sanders'
J.O.
wife,
Sanders' wife, yeah, who it is
Plunkett. What's her
yeah,
first name?
I want to say
Marianne.
Marianne, but is it Marianne?
We hate to get it wrong when we
Yeah.
had
Oh,
Jay
this is
here
so
sitting right here looking us in the eye. She's fantastic though in a
Marianne.
scene
It
that
is Marianne. Marianne Plunkett.
in a
Yeah.
scene that doesn't have a lot of or a character that doesn't have a lot of screen time to be what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Her presence is deeply felt, and it's a story about families and stuff. And another kudos to the movie and to these actors that we won't name them all, but Fred's staff on the show, the way they
Oh,
respond and react to him
absolutely.
makes him a real person, probably more than anything Tom Hanks could have done with that character.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. It's a very famous scene from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood Lore, but the he tries to put up that tent by himself.
Oh my God, that's so good. Yeah.
It's really awesome. It's really great. It really gets that
Mm-hmm.
mix exactly right. I'll note though, to do so, it really have to invent a lot of stuff that is not part of the really cool actual real story. I've never minded that so much. I don't think movies are real life per se, but I have learned a lot of my own history based on them. So, I get
Mm-hmm.
it. Younger generations are growing super, super intolerant of historical accuracy in movies, and I guess that's or historical inaccuracy, and I guess that's to be admired to some degree, but I
Right.
never want to let it get in the way of a good movie, so I'm still a little bit on the mercenaries side of it.
Yeah, because well, I mean, yeah, again, and that's a larger discussion whether between telling a story and a narrative arc
Bearing
versus.
witness to Harriet Tubman's incredible actions as a person is amazing, but it isn't a substitute for what A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which is following and connecting emotionally with an amazing
Yeah.
human story. And that this movie gets that right, but to do it, it had to pull some strings, and
Mm-hmm.
So
Let's also give it up for I really liked Enrico. Is it Colatoni?
I think so.
Yeah, I can't remember.
That's a
Colatoni,
name I've
Colatoni.
read
Yeah,
100
Colatoni.
times because he's a
And
really good actor.
he's a great actor. You've seen him in a zillion things.
Yeah, you may not know the name, but you'll know
He's
his
so
face.
good as essentially the guy who runs the network, or runs that that Fred Rogers and that Mr. Rogers Neighborhood is on, and essentially like his.
Enrico also, since we brought him up, we can't go into this, Joel, so just hold your horses.
Yep.
But he also played the greatest benevolent alien of all time.
Yes, he did.
Suck it, E.T.
Yes, he did. I would absolutely agree with that. As long as we're thinking about the same benevolent alien.
I think so. We'll let you guys figure that out. We have more movies to talk about.
Excuse me. All right. So so let's move on to essentially the polar opposite of the world of Mr. Rogers. And that is the world of Fox News in the movie Bombshell.
Bombshell. Talk about inventing stuff. It's
Yeah.
funny that in Bombshell, the only part of Bombshell that works like a charm is the stuff they just made up. And it does show you how in this format, you know, it that's I'm not even begrudging that they did that. I'm just saying it's weird that that's how this story is so sordid and ugly and awful, and the players involved from top to bottom are all such some degree of terrible, gross people that it just really hard to get into anything. So what the film does is it whatever, I can't remember what you just called, but it introduces an amalgam character.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that story that works. It's really, they just should have gotten rid of all the rest of this and just told that story, because the Fox News story, while the parts that it tells truthfully, it gets factually correct. It's just, I didn't like Bombshell. It wasn't what I thought. It wasn't as terrible as I thought it was going to be based on its ads, which were all like sex scandal at work. It was all like selling some sort of horrible Shonda Rhimes TV show, and it was, I hated the advertising for it. I'm like, that's not what they're gonna do, is it? It turns out, no, not entirely what they're going to do. They're going to do plenty of that, but they're not. It's not just that. They really do get to the sort of horror of the thing, but they sort of miss what, and this is unforgivable. They sort of miss what Fox News was and what it's done and what it is. And I get amongst a sex scandal and sexual abuse that may not seem so important, but it is. It's crucially important. This film doesn't manage that. John Lithgow, who the jury's out on John, he's spectacular, right? I mean, we've known that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not his fault that in what's this movie called again?
Bombshell.
That even the name, what are you calling it that for?
Yeah.
Just he's not good in it. He plays a cartoon character kind of. And it's not bad, because the guy's awful and gross and evil, and that certainly comes across in the movie, but Lithgow's not allowed to, or doesn't have the space to play him as a person. So he's not really that scary, because he's not someone living on the planet with us. He's this representation of sexual deviance and a control freak and all this. It's a bummer. Charlize is great in it. I can see why she was nominated for an Oscar, but go back and watch Megan Fox on Fox News. You know, Megan Kelly. Sorry, she's washed her hands of that experience, but she was a Fox News attack dog. She sucked the masses and the mobs and the misinformed crazy people on the innocent people worldwide that would come on her show to talk to her about what they cared about. She wasn't a good person. The film whitewashes all of that. And Gretchen Carlson, it's kind of the same, although a little different. Gretchen Carlson, what the movie gets right is that Gretchen Carlson, who never really was, she was harassed, but never completely abused by him, because she kind of never let herself submit to it, which good for her. As a victim, she was only ever harassed, and she documented it and then advised her lawyers on how to get him, and then got him, brought him down. And that's all in the movie. And it's good sport watching a villain like that shamed and broken, and that the movie does deliver on that. But what did I say was good? Margot Robbie.
Yeah, Margot Robbie is
to a lesser degree Kate McKinnon.
Right.
Which again, this has to be invented, because it's this it's closeted, we expect bisexual and a closeted lesbian working at Fox News. One of whom's just kind of vacuous and ambitious, and the other is liberal and just stuck here and can't get a job anyplace else. That's the theory of these characters. None of that really rings true. So the setup feels ridiculous, but as that story plays out, it's the story of abuse, and it's handled in an extremely personal way. And because Margot's character isn't a character we know and isn't someone whose facts we have to follow. The emotional journey is immensely powerful. I remember when Michael Klug, our friend of the show, he sort of types each Oscar movie as he sees them. He does his little capsule reviews, and he said, well, I can't remember what he said, but it stuck with me, even though I didn't see it till almost a year later. He said, that phone call scene is what he said. And that phone call scene is as good as anything in any movie that came out last year. So it's really irritating to me that Bombshell just misses the mark in so many ways. For a film that's about as dark as stuff as it's a breezy entertainment. And it annoys me that it is that.
It's directed by Jay Roach, and that's what he does for the most part, is he does,
Well, and we mentioned, you said, although neither of us had seen the movie, but you said, well, this has the opportunity to be a movie about Roger Ailes that, unlike the Showtime miniseries, that's not from Roger Ailes' point of view, that's from these women's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
It does not achieve that at all. And the benefit of something circling or rotating around Roger's actual life is that Roger in the Showtime series is a person and is much scarier, much more dangerous, much more believable, maybe pitiable to some degree, but a much more terrifying monster because he's a person. That film pulls that off. This film doesn't even try to do that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't even try. And it doesn't really have room, but it annoys me, even though it's very watchable and everyone should see it. It's on this list because there's some great stuff in it. A couple of things of which I kind of told you without totally spoiling it. It's not a bad movie. It's just a missed opportunity. It's a well-made, massive missed opportunity. I'll just put it that way.
A movie that I'm looking forward to seeing, I just ran out of time, was Two Popes.
Two Popes, one of the Netflix movies.
Yeah, one of the Netflix movies.
Which I thought was nominated for Best Picture. I guess it's not.
No, it was not.
Were Anthony Hopkins and Jonathan Pryce nominated at least?
Jonathan Pryce was nominated for Best Actor. And Anthony Hopkins for Best Supporting.
That's weird. It's weird that you would make that distinction between the two, but I guess that's how you get them both
nominated. That's how you get them both nominated, yeah.
Anthony Hopkins, no stranger to be nominated for supporting actor. Well, that's not true. It's the opposite when he won his Oscar, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He was nominated for lead actor for a role that only had like 13 minutes of screen time.
Right.
Whatever. The Two Popes is... it's a Netflix movie, so you should just watch it because what better Netflix movies you're going to get. I guess there's a couple on this list that rival it, but it's really, really good. But it does feel a bit like a homework assignment of a film. It's very it's just very simply told. And what's amazing about it is that the way these two characters are brought together on screen, but it's also a fantasy of an idea of a movie. We don't know that any of these interactions happened. We know the biographical beats of the two men, but this sort of like powwow, I talked about it last year with Mary, Queen of Scots, like the idea that Mary and Elizabeth II or Elizabeth I were ever like in the same room together talking it over like sisters is ludicrous. And this, even though they must have interacted in some way, this sort of well-told stage play version of how they interact seems weird. But it makes for really, really great drama, and you learn a lot, particularly about our current Pope, through Jonathan Pryce's portrayal and the history that they bring to that character. I thought it was a phenomenal film, but I don't know. I just don't want people to come yelling at me, telling me how bored they were by it or whatever. It is a kind of weird. It's like a stage play of a film.
If you think you're going to be watching the new Pope or the young Pope, the Jude Law show, that is not this.
But that's what's great about it. It's not bombshell. There are no allegorical characters. The interactions are, and the debates between the two are a bit of a fantasy, but they're based in the reality, the fundamental reality of who the two people are and were. And that's powerful on screen. And the performances are off the hook amazing. They're really just incredible. Price in particular, but Hopkins too is really, really good. It's a really strong movie. So I don't mean to hem and haw about it. I really liked it. I just know that this isn't what a lot people want, escapist fun, and this is like just this is the extreme opposite of that.
Sure.
It's intellectual and it makes you think and it challenges your idea about things, and it doesn't play on your emotions in easy ways, and it doesn't set up problems that are solved at all. It's all those things that are challenging about films. And so, but I thought it was fantastic. I really liked that movie a lot.
A couple more movies before we get into the Best Picture nominees, and our true Altskers. A couple of lighter fare. I mean, just more pop. More pop.
But nominated for a bunch of Oscars.
But nominated for a bunch of Oscars was and again, and kind of as we were talking about before we started recording, it's kind of fun to remember that, geez, these did come out just in 2019. And one, of course, is Star Wars Episode 9: The Rise of Skywalker, which
we have a whole episode about, which really an episode and 3/4 is about, which you can go back and listen to. So we won't talk much about that, but remember the last Star Wars movie was playing in theaters a year ago.
Yeah. And
that's what my reaction to that is intense, because it's, wow, that was last year. That was 1 year ago.
that is one of those that,
unlike Two Popes and some other things like that, hits home in a weird way. There hasn't been a Star Wars movie since then, but there's been new Mandalorian episodes, so I guess that's cool. But that was the big thing, the big movie coming out at the end of the year. It was nominated for a bunch of effects awards and stuff. And we just kind of put it here because it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, and also we just also wanted to remember that this is the era that we were talking about. The other one was Knives Out, which was
another big
super
Christmas
fun
movie that was not a surprise hit, I suppose, and not and has some Star Wars connection.
It does have some Star Wars connection, then, Rian Johnson.
Maybe we won't get into that. There's an episode about that too.
But it's super fun. It is, Knives Out was just a great, fun, whodunit sort of. Not even a whodunit.
It is a whodunit.
Yeah, it's a whodunit, and
I mean, maybe the whodunit isn't.
Yeah, it's a
number
whodunit
one on its list of things to achieve, but a whodunit is exactly what it is. It's trying to be a high level, old school form of that style of entertainment.
Yeah,
and it achieves that pretty perfectly. Somebody asked me the other day when I was recommending it, is it anything more than just like a really good modern whodunit? And I was like, no, it isn't any more than that. That really is all it achieves. But it's a really great reminder that some country house, bunch of wacky characters, you know what I mean? A bunch of interview, confrontational style drama, like that plays. It still plays.
And again, the fact that that's all it achieves is not a bad thing.
No,
it's hard to pull, especially with savvy modern audiences. I think it's hard to pull off a whodunit. It's hard to pull off that sort of plot line where you have someone trying to sort out all the clues and who is, you need a character that is smarter than the audience, but you also can't hide things from the audience. You can't dumb things down for the audience. It's not an easy thing to achieve, and it does achieve it really well. And it just makes it fun. It really is
super fun movie.
Yeah. Oh, it's so much fun.
Which on this list makes it stand out a little bit because the next most fun movie is probably Bombshell, and we already talked about what that's about, which is absurd. so it's fun. It's great. Ryan Johnson is a really, really clever actor. Or writer, director. His high school neo noir film Brick is a brilliant piece of filmmaking. His sort of Wes Anderson light um, heist film Brothers Bloom is fantastic,
Right. Yeah.
and so this is sort of along those lines. He's obviously been hated and burned in effigy the worldwide for The Last Jedi, but he's a fantastic filmmaker, and this just reminds you why. And with the gloves taken off and the restraints of massive budget filmmaking taken away, it's really awesome. That said, it's full of stars, and it's what you would want from a film of that kind. And you compare it to something like Murder on the Orient Express, which is true whodunit classic, we'll call it, rather than neo whodunit. And I thought that film was really enjoyable too. But I like old fashioned storytelling. That movie's super old fashioned, where this feels contemporary and hip, and it has that sort of coolness to it that people really loved. So
yeah,
it wasn't nominated for much, but it really does. It was an award season movie, and it was a really popular one right in the heart of award season. And they're going to do Agatha Christie style. They're making a sequel to it with Daniel Craig's detective character and a whole nother cast of
good
crazy red herrings, and both Joel and I will be first in line for that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, so it was. Yeah, I mean, I can see why. Good.
His dialogue is really, really great, and all these other movies that I talked about, it's cracking and entertaining, and he gets the form and celebrates it and modernizes it while not taking it down a peg. That's really the magic of Ryan Johnson. And it was fun to see that. So.
Yeah. All right. So now we get to our Best Picture nominees, and the first one of and the
winner is
the winner. Yeah, we'll start with the winner because this is the Oscars, so it is not really about the winner. The winner was. It won Best Director, it won Best Original Screenplay, won Best Foreign Film, and it wins Best Picture, Parasite. And Parasite, great movie. But let's talk about
by South Korean director. Say his name for me because you have it written.
Bong Joon-ho.
And he's, I believe so.
Yeah,
and he's. He's a pretty famous director. He directed Snowpiercer. He directed Okja on Netflix. He directed The Host. It's a great monster movie. And what's his murder movie? Do you have his list in front of you?
I
can't remember what it's called. Something Murders. It's fantastic.
Where are you?
Coming out in high definition, courtesy of the Criterion Collection in a couple of months. Everyone should see it.
Memories of Murder.
Memories of Murder. Fantastic film. So this is a guy with quite the pedigree as it is. And Parasite has all of the strengths you would expect from him, and has his sort of weaknesses, or his repeated compulsions are also there, fully on display. But that was a good movie. The game we play when we get into the Oscars is we each have to pick a different movie that we think should have won the Oscars, and most years that's actually pretty easy, and we're able to each pick one and not feel like we're stepping on each other's toes. And it was tough this year. It was tough a couple of years ago too, because they were all so even, and the year that Shape of Water won, and it was just, you kind of picked your favorite based on what your own proclivities were. This year they're not of the same quality. They're of kind of all over this weird spectrum. But obviously Parasite's pretty awesome. So
now let's talk about one end of this weird spectrum in Todd Phillips's Joker.
Yeah, it's a pretty divisive movie.
Yeah,
and
wins for Best Actor in Joaquin Phoenix.
being a sensitive guy, I really thought I wasn't going to like it. I thought it was going to be this hyper violent sort of trampling of the innocent kind of film. And I hate to say it, I maybe I'm ashamed. I don't know. I just know a lot of really smart people who just hate Joker because it's sort of amoral, awful creation of a killer. Story is repugnant to them, but I got totally swept up in Joker. Like I really was really into it. I was really riveted. I don't know say that I was enjoying myself and partying while I was watching it, but I was just glued to it in a way that not all of these films, didn't really achieve that.
Yeah.
And in that weird way that anti-hero sort of revenge tale works on you, you start to find yourself rooting for him. You start to find yourself wanting him to escape. And, even though you're not supposed to, the movie's form and the tension within it sort of works. So it worked on me. So I'm sorry if that bugs people, but I liked it. I thought Joaquin, it's a role few others could play quite like him.
Sure.
We talked about improv combat. He's a little method to the point of being really comically frustrating and practically dangerous. I don't know that that's stupid. Yeah. There's a really clever actor. I don't know who it was. It's somebody like Paul Rudd, but it isn't Paul Rudd, but it's like, yeah, I've heard, you never hear a method actor say, oh, well, yeah, remember that time I was playing that really nice, kind person and I was nice and kind to everybody the whole run. Like a lot of that is just an excuse to act out and be a jerk, I'm not saying that's the whole thing behind method acting, but Joel, you get kind of what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying.
It is an interesting way to look at it. Oh, yeah, that's
in order to, I mean, the idea behind it and the why it always gets why it gets applied here and to these types of roles is in order to get yourself to these dark places where we as people who are generally trying to be good people, we don't want to go to. Right. It takes that, the argument is it takes that level of commitment in order to make that appear, because the camera reveals so much. If you're not fully committed into it, to the point at where,
and Daniel Day-Lewis, Christian Bale, Joaquin Phoenix in this, the results are on the screen. It's not like it doesn't work per se. It does work. Having to be called Mr. President, for the whole run or whatever, speaking in your whatever your dialect is for 3 months without a break. Those things, the results do show up on film, so that's not the thing. But
yeah, I hated Joker. I hated it.
Well, I think that's a legit reaction to Joker. That's kind of why
I didn't. I mean, to me, and maybe this is just because there's too much. Maybe if I saw it in the theater in the moment, I would feel differently. But I'm like, oh, this is just, here's all my bag of tricks. I didn't buy any of what Joaquin Phoenix was putting on the screen. I just didn't buy it. It all seemed artificial and put on.
Film if you're not buying into any
and and I also I have a real problem when mental illness is shown as, really mental illness leads to these violent and these break from realities portraying people with mental illness like this, which is far too common. I'm like, no, I don't like that. This is not, I don't care about this. I don't, the societal, and I think obviously so much of it was trying to capture that New York City of the early 80s when it was just a cesspool, and what is it, Ford to, or Carter to New York, drop dead. I can't remember what the president was, who that, and it was and I think there was trying to do that. I didn't get, and the idea, and Robert De Niro was just so phenomenally bad.
Really?
I'm like, I'm supposed to believe that you're the like the Johnny Carson, the go-to nighttime host. I'm like, there was no personality there at all, and I'm like,
but that's wow, what I liked about it. I liked that Robert kind of refused to paint up that character to like the rest of. I thought his normal low-key delivery was kind of awesome for it, and frankly was Johnny Carson-esque, because that is a lot of what he was. It was very understated.
Sure. Well, but Johnny,
not just humor, but in real life, it was that times 10. Like, he really was this very kind of quiet guy who was not a clown off screen at all.
No, and I'm not saying he needed to be a clown, and I get that that's what they were trying to do, but I mean, he at least you could.
It's the parallels they're trying to draw to between Taxi Driver, which this is a loose remake of, and King of Comedy, which it also sort of plays on quite a bit. So, and I thought as a modern remake of Taxi Driver, it wasn't half bad, but I also think that mental ill, the psychos of the 60s and 70s really were mentally ill people that were living in a society that didn't recognize them at all for what they did, didn't have ways to categorize them or help or support them. And this movie, I think, shows more than most that whether the economics are completely unsuitable. I also think there's that sense of when something's wrong with you, he's got a mother in the film who just refuses to believe any evidence of anything, and I think that it is broad and allegorical, but I feel like those things ring true in a way. But the neighbor, the woman who is just simply there as an object, who's just where I'm just like, no, come on. I'd agree with you on that one. And to your broader point, these films, it's a movie. There's an HBO series by the guy who made Treme, worked on The Sopranos, with James Franco. I can't remember what it's called now. But it's all about late 70s New York and the porn industry and the club atmosphere and stuff. And if you want to tell the stories of those things, you think you want to, and you think you don't want to glorify them, but it's tough. And this film glorifies that. It glorifies that icky world. It makes you almost think a movie like feels that's reality or whatever. It's hard to explain, but it definitely glorifies the violence and all of that. So it's guilty of that, but I think going into it that that's the kind of movie you're going to see.
Do I think it was worthy of all of that pre-release controversy just based on the trailers? No, I don't think it was deserving of all of that.
It's a different take on a comic book story. It's a totally different take, which I admire.
Which I agree. I completely. That from that perspective.
Compared to how Danny DeVito becomes the Penguin, this is like, it is deeper and there is more going on. So I'm just saying, but Joel's not wrong. Everything he said is dead on. And whether you like it or not is just whether,
well, and so much of
whatever your mindset is going in, whether you're going to be allowed to be swept away by it or not.
And in a movie like this,
it's a really unpleasant.
So much of it is absolutely dependent on buying into Joaquin Phoenix as this character, and I never did. And so it's like it was, it's like, okay, I'm this is just clearly not for me. So let's move on though.
Okay.
Let's move on to, like, again, the polar opposite. Let's move to the other end of the spectrum, the literary classic, the wonderful story of young women growing up in New England
during the Civil War,
post-Civil War, Little Women.
during the Civil War.
Yeah, in the
While the
War.
Civil War is going on miles and miles away, there were no battles of Vermont that I recall. The South didn't ever get up
Right.
that far, so there's some memorials, but furthest they got was Gettysburg, as we all know. But either way, the war hangs over this. Their father is gone fighting the war, even though he's this weird sort of Walden Pond transcendentalist pacifist. He's still an officer in the war because he is from a good family, and that's really all it took.
Yeah.
When they were handing out the officer cards when the war was starting. So sorry, that's not really what it's about. It really is about these near impoverished sisters growing up during that time, and the women of the family having to fight it out on their own amidst the conventions of the late 19th century society. And it's great. It's one of the best novels of that period ever written, really. And it's just a fantastic story. And it's as the movie teaches us and as the book teaches us, it's biographical in that way that is made up and yet very, very real.
Yeah.
And finding that magic is part of the journey of the story, which is fun. And it's part of why the story is so good. That said, I didn't love this version of Little Women, and I really wanted to. Now, I'm a big Greta Gerwig fan. Obviously, I'm a big Saoirse Ronan fan. Anyone who watches the show knows that. I try and bring her up every time I can.
Yeah, she is wonderful in this.
She's great. She's really well cast in it. And Greta wasn't going to cast her. She had they know each other because they just did Lady Bird together, obviously. And Saoirse had to bug her, basically badger into casting, which I think is funny.
Yeah.
You don't know it yet, but that's how you're going to put me in that role, is basically what she was saying to her. And it's great. Pretty much the only the sister that's hardest to pull off in this film is played by Florence Pugh, and who's a really, really good actor, but is sort of I don't know who they could have stuck in this role to play this kid when she's 9 and then be playing her again when she's 24. Most versions of Little Women sort of cast 2 different actors. It was Kirsten Dunst and Samantha Morton in 1992, or Samantha Mathis in 1992. And that didn't work any better. You're just like, they're not the same person, like at all. They're not who, you know what I mean? It's like a different person.
Yeah.
It didn't work much better when it was clearly the same person. What I object to in Little Women is it's an unnecessary deconstruction of Little Women. I don't understand why the timeline is all jumbled. Yeah. You're robbed of. This is not a bad movie. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
But you're robbed of their growth as characters. This sort of clean, linear, making their way through the world that's in the book is just absent completely from this, and you're left with the plot mechanisms of it, which are interesting. Who's going to marry who, whatever, but you don't see Meg fall in love with the teacher. You jump to a part where they're already married, and then you jump back to when they're asking her to be married. You don't experience any of this stuff, and it's all there. All you got to do is just do it, and it happens like magic. And they found a way to avoid all of that, which I don't understand that. And without spoiling what Greta's going for with the ending is this. I don't think the author really intended Little Women to end a certain way, so I'm going to show that way, but I'm going to show it in a way that allows the audience to dismiss it, which is a very modern feminist take on it. And she might be right about Mary Louise. Who knows? It's hard we don't know. She's not around to ask anymore. But again, the book is sort of time honored, and to get to the end of this complicated puzzle piece of this version of Little Women, and then to have the ending just go just really float up into the ether in a way that you don't believe, and then you later find out you're not supposed to really believe it. It was all weird to me, man. I'm a massive fan of Gillian Armstrong's 1992 Little Women with Winona Ryder and Susan Sarandon. And I was like, well, they're doing it again. I don't know how they're going to improve on that, because that film just sort of gets it perfectly.
Yeah.
The Joe character and Louisa May Alcott were women ahead of their time, and that was enough. They don't have to be of our time. You know what I mean? It was enough that they were what they were. It was a miracle. And so I was annoyed by this version, even though it is very enjoyable. The multi-tiered plot of Little Women is complicated and fun and worthy of this sort of making it into this kind of movie, but I missed out. The film only seems to slow down when Timothy Chalamet's on screen, and that's a character
that's just because he's so dreamy,
I guess. And that's a character that is willing to change, but in the book he sort of snaps his fingers and says, "All right, I've been doing this.
Yep,
I'm gonna do that." And in the film, it's all wishy-washy. That moment of realization sort of isn't captured very well, which is too bad.
I agree with I think everything that you're saying. I mean, I could not.
It's not my reaction is the reaction of women who've loved this story their whole lives. They reacted the same. They're like, it's not. I think it's good. I mean, I don't hate it, but where is it? Something about Little Women that connects with me isn't here, and I think that might be different for everybody. And I still think they missed it. All of those things.
Yep. Here's what I would. I think it's because what you're talking about is this sort of jumping around in timeline, the nonlinear telling of the story this way makes it to me it makes Joe the character feel sort of like it is stunted in her development. Like she seems childish where everybody because of the jumping around. There's there's a very big point, like the point where she's talking about Meg on Meg's wedding day and things like that. It makes her feel so immature and
because Joe in this movie, because we don't see her setbacks, we don't see them kind of in order.
Yeah.
It's this freight train, a single-minded sort of thing that's just plowing through the film. And I really do think that's because of look, Greta's an incredible filmmaker, and I'm not going to disparage this. And I appreciate her attempt to do something different with this material rather than the same old thing.
Yeah, because that's really the only way. The only reason to try and do Little Women now is like I have a unique take on it. Right. And someone clearly of Greta Gerwig's ability, and she's earned a chance to. Earned is a weird word, but like her track record, her pedigree is enough for a studio to go, you got an idea on Little Women? Let's do it. And so, I agree. To me, I watched it and I was like, this is lovely. Boy, this was super fun. Not the best movie of the year. No. But
I don't even know if it should be nominated really, but
I don't
mind. I don't mind that it was. It has a lot of great things in it, but like Emma Watson's in that movie. It's easy to watch the whole thing and forget as soon as it's over that she was even in it, and it shouldn't be like that. Meg is already her stuff gets settled early, and so I don't jumping back to before she was married near the end of the movie, like there's no payoff in any of that that I could see or that I experienced. But I read the book for a change, and I've seen a movie that is pretty much the book on screen that I love. Somebody who hasn't, maybe this is cool.
Right.
But I had some friends asking me, is it good? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's good. But I told them, I go back and watch that other movie. It just bothered me to think that this was how they were going to be introduced to these characters in the story.
Sure.
Because it bugged me enough that I was like, don't watch that, watch the other one, which I felt guilty about after, because there's no reason not to recommend Greta's film. It just, I don't know.
Yeah. I just remember when I was watching it, I tried to put myself as, okay, if I were if I were a boy, like if I was watching this when I was 12 or whatever, you know, and obviously I can't know what a 12-year-old girl would feel like watching this, but you know, just trying to like, okay, well, if I were, you know, I can see where you're just like, maybe this version of Joe, where she is so singularly focused and so passionate about this thing that she loves so much. Maybe
And
that
Joe
is,
is, but
yeah,
it's pits, it rises, and you know what I mean?
yeah, and we never
When
really,
you
yeah, we don't,
bop back and forth, she really, that's a well
yeah,
stated as anything. The main character of the story really,
yeah,
the author herself on the page, and she just doesn't feel very nuanced,
hmm
even though Saoirse's fantastic in it, you know.
hmm yeah, she
And
really is, yeah,
she's great, but it was a more mannered time, and they didn't jibber jabber over each other like they do in the film. Like even that, which I wouldn't begrudge otherwise,
hmm
was difficult because you want these big moments in their lives to land cleanly, and none of them really tend to do that.
yep. All
But
right,
it
so,
sweeps you along and sweeps you away. You do give a crap about the people in the story. I mean, you really do, and you care how it shakes out, and so it's not a bad movie at
mhm.
all. It's just I was not able to overcome my Little Women biases that I brought to the party at
Sure,
all.
sure. Well, that 82 movie is a tremendous
It's
film
really,
too.
I mean,
Um,
it's a little staid and a little Hallmark specially, but it just really is wonderful,
yeah.
and
Um,
equally cast with people at the very tip top of their game playing these roles.
so moving from the world of Little Women to the movie about guys being guys,
Yeah, we need more
Ford,
of those.
yeah, Ford versus Ferrari, or it should be drivers versus marketing guys.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Ford versus Ferrari, Matt Damon, Christian Bale, super fun movie.
It's
Uh,
great. It's
yeah.
great. Really, really well made by what's his face, who made the final two Wolverine movies and a bunch of biopics. He made
Mhm.
the Ray Charles biopic and some other things. He's a super talented guy. Can't remember his
Yeah,
name.
James Mangold.
Yeah, Mangold. You know, all over the map kind of filmmaker, and he sort of
Mhm.
delivers it with everything he tries. Um, and this is no exception. But it is light sort of biopic sports entertainment.
Yeah.
That's not a knock on it, but it's not a knock on it to say that it's no better than any of the basketball movies that we got once a year for a while there. That you know,
Mhm.
those were all great, and they work on you in a really, really great way. This film, you know, Cars is expensive, and period Cars is even more expensive. So having it just to do it is a tricky thing, and to make it crowd pleasing enough that justifies its expense in these days where if it doesn't have capes and lasers shooting out of people's eyes, people just don't care.
Right.
Is impressive because it was a hit movie, and it did really well, and it pushed all the buttons. But I don't have a lot to say about it beyond that. It
Yeah.
is really good for what it is.
It's
Um,
Christian Bale doing the type of role that he's so good. Again, a singularly focused, passionate guy.
yeah,
That's one of, that's something that Christian Bale is so good at playing.
right, and
Uh,
like Mark Wahlberg in The Fighter, or any of the other people that Christian has to play off of. In this film, you have Matt Damon
yeah,
perfectly cast as the
as
straight
Carol
guy. So
Shelby. Yeah.
it's yeah. I just remember when Bale was accepting his Oscar for The Fighter. He's like, you can't you can't do what I got to do in this movie if you're not across from somebody who the bulk of the time isn't holding down the fort
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of actual humanity and stuff. And we're not super big fans of Mark Wahlberg on the show, but Mark Wahlberg's great in The Fighter, and so that point is taken, and it works the same here. Damon's got to be the main character of the movie, and he doesn't get to do hardly any of the fun stuff. And I mean,
Yeah.
he's the man. He's perfect for that. I mean,
Yeah.
he's good for other things too, but he really is the perfect leading man of that generation. and this film sort of proves it. And it was a hit. Rush by Ron Howard with Thor and
Chris Hemsworth. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Thor.
Yeah, it had Thor in it,
Yeah.
and it had that guy who was trying to get Iron Man to kill Captain America. They're great, and that was another racing movie that's really, really fantastic. That came out, was perfect, got great reviews, and nobody came to see it. So I'm happy that Ford versus Ferrari was a hit. I had a great time. I wish there were more movies like that. So yay.
Yeah.
But in this field, and Little Women to a lesser degree is sort of it's a lesser of these films. No
Yeah,
doubt.
I would agree.
Just because its ambitions aren't the same.
Yeah, and it's really good. There's
really great.
like you said, there's not a whole lot you can say about it other than it's super fun. It's super fun.
Great,
it's great.
crowd-pleasing sports film.
It's tight. It's the pacing's great on it.
It's got
it
some interesting biography in it that you probably didn't know.
Some great car racing sequences, and it is. You got a great villain. And the villain is not really Ferrari. The villain is within your own ranks, and so it was good. So let's move on to the next few movies. They do elicit strong reactions. So let's go to war. We're going to go to World War II first. And we'll talk about Taika Waititi's Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah, Jojo Rabbit. That's a film I hated before I even saw it, so it's really not. Just to be upfront. Just to be upfront about it, because I just hated it before I saw it, and then when I watched it, I hated it. Because it was what I thought it was. But at the same time, let's talk about the couple things that are great about Jojo Rabbit. One, it creates this satirical sort of amusement park version of Nazi Germany that is delightfully created on screen. And you've got these characters who are, I don't know what we can exactly do with them. As I say, it's a satire. So they're big and broad and crazy like you'd expect, but the film has this, like all the Waititi's stuff, it's got this incredibly buoyant energy about it that gets you from one thing to the next in this sort of wonderful way. And it's got gags and physical gags and laughs that make you laugh. Like I laughed out loud a few times during that movie, even whilst I was cursing it in my soul. I was giggling at it because you almost can't help not to. He's funny. He's got this his vampire show, he's got this, he's a funny guy. Okay, so so it is that stuff. That said, the biggest problem with Jojo Rabbit, and maybe I'm being naive, maybe there's a big point to it. It says right on the poster. The fact that it has to say this is a knock against it, I think. But nevertheless, it says right on the poster, a anti-war satire.
Sure.
But it isn't about war at all. There's no war in it. So it's not an anti-war satire.
No.
It's maybe an anti-hatred satire. That'd be closer, I think, to what I feel it's going for.
I think that's absolutely closer.
But what it hangs on, that idea, just isn't kind of acceptable. This idea that you could be hiding a Jewish kid in Germany during World War II in your apartment, and she's just wandering around in there. Granted, this is a comedy. It's not meant to be realistic, but it tries to pull on your heartstrings in a realistic way. So you have to hold it to account for not being realistic in any other way, I think. At least I did.
Okay.
That's absurd. I mean, you couldn't do that in Poland. You couldn't do it in Holland. So you damn well couldn't do it in Germany. It didn't take incompetent Nazis to get you off the hook. That there were plenty of incompetent Nazis. It was that every single person was there to inform you, watching your every move, and every incompetent Nazi was single-minded in what they were doing. The film presents this sort of, maybe it's a good Nazi, maybe it's not. We're not really sure. That ambiguity isn't helpful in a satire, but I appreciate that it was there and at least tried to justify some of what you saw. You know, there's some huge major Third Reich style film setbacks and dramatic moments in this film that this film doesn't deserve to have at all, and really can't have. You know, it's not that you can't laugh at Hitler. Watch South Park, man. They make Hitler's really, really funny, but they're irreverent enough. What they're not doing is saying, well, here's the Holocaust, and then they're saying, what's funny about it? And they kind of ruthlessly go after it. What TD's saying, here's the Holocaust. See how the ways it might have been funny. Oh, it actually was really sad. Okay, here's a free hug for you to get over the Holocaust. Now go about your life. And there aren't free hugs enough to in any way make up for what that actually was. And there aren't even free hugs enough to make up for what is on screen in that film. So this sort of simple way of looking at it all, or this sort of aimless way of it satirizing something that you can't quite put your finger on.
Sure.
You know, without spoiling I'm trying not to spoil the dramatic beats because there's some surprising.
Right. Yeah.
But, you know, this I don't think is a spoiler. I mean, the movie ends with this kid sort of learning his lesson in this absurdly simple way, and then kicking Hitler, I don't think it's a spoiler to say Hitler's his imaginary friend. What does he say? F you, Hitler? And then he drop kicks him through a wall or something?
Essentially, yeah. I don't remember if he actually says
a story about Nazi Germany, the rise of fascism, the rise of hate, even a funny one, which I think is possible, can't end with that sort of simple, I reject hate. You know, it was everything I thought it would be, and it failed in every way, all the ways I thought it would be. And I think I've given it as fair an analysis as I can.
Yeah. I think everything that you're saying is fair. There are things that I think just worked for it. Some of the things that didn't work for you did work for me. I guess I really locked in on it as the story of this 10-year-old boy who has known nothing but of what he is supposed to be.
He really wants to be a great Nazi because he wants
to be the best Nazi
and is bought into the But
that line that
comic strip
Stephen Merchant has,
the way it deals with that.
the line that Stephen Merchant has when he walks into his bedroom and he's like, this is a good boy's bedroom. I wish more boys had your blind fanaticism. He wants to be the best Nazi, like other kids, want to be a great basketball player.
Right.
And Hitler is more than his imaginary friend. He's his whole conscience. And
kind of.
Yeah, and
so I don't think that's really true. He's fighting against him and debating with him from the start, really.
Yeah, no, that's
questioning him.
Yeah,
all throughout.
And it's.
I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's the relationship.
Yeah, it's his conscience. It's that part of his conscience of this is what I'm supposed to be versus this is what I'm feeling.
Right.
And I think that's pretty clear. But yeah, I just
the two kids in it are really great together. Like there's this
the best friend, the kid with the glasses. Yeah, they captured some absolutely killer takes on some the way he develops or the way he.
What TD tells a mean story and this is no different. It's just it's not I don't. It's as an allegory for anything that's happening in the world today. It doesn't work because it's just way too over the top and cartoonish.
Yeah.
And as any sort of statement on actual Nazism in World War II, it's again bizarrely disconnected from anything remotely believable until it decides it doesn't want to be, and then it kind of tries to slap you in the face like a clown slapping you in the face. But this was a clown that I wanted to slap back. I didn't, you know what I mean? I didn't take it at all and I know really smart people who thought this was beloved, but you can't tell me it's a satire and it's a simplistic one. And if you can't tell me simply what it's satirizing, what it's trying to say, then it's failed. And I don't think you can.
I didn't realize that the movie poster literally said it's an anti-war satire, because you're absolutely right. It's not.
It's definitely a satire. We can all agree on that.
Yeah, but it's certainly not an anti-war satire.
It's anti-hate satire. Maybe it says anti-hate on the poster.
Okay, if they're saying it's an anti-hate right on the poster, then that's accurate. But again, that's a good point that you make. Why you shouldn't have to say that on your poster?
Well,
but
maybe you do.
Look,
I mean, I'm not going to argue with the marketing guys in this case. You don't have to show the whole movie in the trailer, right? We've said that, but apparently they do. That's what sells movies. So I'm not. I just was pointing that out as it's telling you what it is, and it isn't living up to what it says it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
In any form, its solutions. It presents you with consequences to hate and solutions for it, and neither of them are believable or remotely satisfying or possible. So its lack of ambiguity and realism is worthless to me.
Yeah.
That's not to say it's not entertaining enough or well crafted.
It's entertaining. There are some really good performances in it. Again, Scarlett Johansson.
It's just sadly done.
Scarlett Johansson was in a different film.
She's okay,
but she's good. She's really good in it. Sam Rockwell.
Sam Rockwell's quite good in it.
Yeah, and then you have to deal with like Rebel Wilson, who I'm like, what are you doing? So
she felt right at home in that movie, I thought. Movie could have used more Rebel Wilson style stuff.
All right, let's
really it's the warm fuzzies the thing tries to provide you that I find offensive. How can you go back to when any of that shit happened, and how can you just say, we'll learn to get along because we'll talk to each other? It's like that. What are you're just pissing all over the history of the actual thing, and frankly pissing over any sort of modern day, of which sadly there are plenty when we look around ourselves, modern day equivalent of that. I told you how I felt about his Thor movie, although to be fair to that, he didn't write that. The flaw of that film really isn't the writing. The directing's pretty awesome in the end, because how do you even make a movie out of that terrible writing? But this story meant something to him, and I'm like, you didn't, not for me, and I'm stunned that it's beloved, and I'm crazy, unbelievable that it won an Oscar or that it was nominated for Best Picture. Like all of that to me is just like, wow.
Yeah,
I don't know how.
Let's move on to another auteur filmmaker, Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
We'll talk more about this in the Quentin Tarantino episode. Okay, so I'm going to keep it short on this just so we don't run out of time, because this is a film like Jojo Rabbit where you really just could. As a matter of fact, it's in some ways it's just like Jojo Rabbit. What is Quentin trying to say? Quentin's own World War II movie is a lot like Jojo Rabbit.
Yes.
What are you trying to say exactly by showing us this? If you go to all this trouble to create this crazy alternate, bizarre, hyper-violent, cartoony sort of history that is showing us things that we know specifically did not happen, what's your point? I feel like to go to all that trouble, I have to know at the end of the thing what you're trying to say. And I didn't at the end in Inglourious Basterds, even though I liked that quite a bit more than I liked Jojo Rabbit, because I at least thought that the horror of that situation existed in an earnest way in that film. And because it was clearly a comment on the form of the World War II movie rather than World War II itself. Which you can't say Jojo Rabbit was. There's never been a World War II movie like that before, and that will probably never ever be one. I hope there will never be one again. But this is the same. It's the same in a way. It's old. It's 60s Hollywood's. It's really about the dying off of 50s era Hollywood.
Yeah.
And that the loss of innocence within that. So there's a theme that you can follow. The reason it works a lot better for me than something like Jojo Rabbit is because it's not equal to the sum of its parts. It really is just, you kind of just got to take delight in what you get. That's what Inglorious Bastards like too. This scene is stupid, but this scene is wow, and this scene is, and
I would, that's actually totally accurate.
Yeah, that's what Quentin's films have been of late, and we'll talk more about why that might be. Like I say, when we get into him, because there's so much to get into. But this is the same as Inglorious Bastards. It's similar to Django Unchained, but it's really the same structurally as Inglorious Bastards in that it presents a completely alternative history to a horrific thing that happened. And I think if you know the history in a clever way, you almost feel worse about the bizarre happy ending because you know what the reality was. And I think Quentin's counting on the informed to understand that. But all the people who don't really know that story, I mean, what did they get out of that movie exactly?
Right. Yeah, sure.
Quentin's he's a powerhouse filmmaker, so he's working on an incredibly high level. The Leonardo DiCaprio scenes of the fallen movie star just hanging on by a thread are all spectacularly delightful. Correct. And yet it's they're really, really great. Every single one I really adored them. They're cheesy, but they're great. Whereas Brad Pitt, who got the Oscar nom and all this best Brad Pitt performance in the years, I liked it actually because me, I like a guy who doesn't show you all the cards, right? And he kind of doesn't. He just waltzes comfortably through this thing.
Yeah.
In a great movie star way. So in a way, Quentin got the right guy to do it, but there's not much there to it. And so I don't know. And that's true of the whole film. And the heart of the film is with Pitt's character. It's not with DiCaprio.
Absolutely.
So I don't know what to say about it. I liked it. I mean, I watched all his Quentin's films, and all of them are like, wow, they're always a wow kind of experience, and I appreciate that. But I don't know what he's trying to say with these alternate history lessons.
That is absolutely my absolute exact reaction. I watched it and I'm going, and like you said, some individual scenes, I was like, damn, yeah, wow, that was great. Some of that, yeah, so like some of those scenes in that, when they were doing the Timothy Oliphant Western thing, and DiCaprio's playing the villain, some of those
stuff was great.
And that scene, the scene at the table where DiCaprio loses his lines a little bit and trying to go back, spectacular, just really great.
Well, and even his monologue in his trailer when he's done that, like his shaming of himself.
My God. That hit a little bit too close to home for me.
Any actor, right? We've all been there where Joel is a super prepared actor. I'm a less prepared actor, and so I've had these experiences more than him. But I can tell you as an actor that you can be really prepared and still something happens, something breaks. And you feel like you've let everybody down. It's a shameful, horrible feeling.
Yeah.
And Leo expresses that outwardly in a way that is very true.
Yeah. But yeah, no, so I had the exact same reaction of, wow. That was
why. At the end of it, I'm going, why? Why are you?
Yeah, that was me. I was like, why? And then, well, frankly, I during the entire
I can't answer it.
Alternate reality ending, and everything that was going on, I was like, I just kept going, what, why, what, why, huh?
Okay. He's got a reason. He's not a dummy.
Yeah.
This is the second movie he's made that's kind of exactly like this, and it's not by accident. You know what I mean? It's not. It's not like he didn't think it through.
Sure, and he's talking about
he do an interview with Quentin. He's not one of those guys who's like, well, I'm just the writer, and it's the characters that are telling me their story. That is not Quentin at all. Everything is pre-planned, set up, laid out, thought through, and choreographed in this very key way. So he's got a reason, but I feel like he's either above me or not.
And I look forward to talking about this more in a Quentin Tarantino episode where we
need to
discuss
move
these
on. We're running out of time.
these alternate history movies. All right, let's talk about.
It gives you a lot to talk about.
Yeah,
even Jojo Rabbit, which I couldn't stand it and really don't tolerate. So I got the opposite lesson out of it. I got a lesson of pure intolerance from Jojo Rabbit, which I'm sure is not what I was supposed to be feeling. But even that, it gives you a ton to talk and think about. That's not the worst thing you can say about a movie, right?
Oh my God, that's
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is just, it's the same. It gives you just a ton to mull over and react to and think about. What you get from it, though, is up to you to a certain
we have
degree,
to when we do the Quentin Tarantino episode, we should try and find someone who is an absolute like devotee that just loves the sunrises and sets in Quentin Tarantino's.
If we know a person like that, that'd be great.
So that it'd be fun to hear someone's perspective like that.
I just got to warn that person in advance. I want answers.
Yeah, me too. It's like,
so.
would you like to come onto our show and be held accountable for the entirety of someone else's career? If you're that person, reach out to us at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook. Let's move on to 1917. World War I film.
Yeah.
This
not a lot of those.
Yeah, it was hard for me to watch this one not hard isn't the right word. It was interesting to watch this movie having seen the Peter Jackson documentary of They Will Not Grow Old.
Because They Will Not Grow Old shows you very specifically these people clinging to normalcy amongst madness, the madness of war. And there was no war more maddening than World War One. Even asking a history teacher why it was happening is difficult. They can't explain it to you in a couple of sentences because it's complicated and stupid and pointless. And that's the real tragedy of World War One.
Yeah.
It's just if I were to try and do it, it's a mutually insured destruction treaty war, where primarily just poor people were just thrown to the slaughter for reasons none of them understood at all. And they were, at least at first, excited to run to their own doom.
Yeah.
This film is running from point A to point Z. That's all it is. Yeah. It's a World War I mission movie. You must get this missive to such and such a place at a certain time, or we're going to lose some major battle and possibly lose the war.
Right.
It's the for the want of a nail, basically.
Right.
Story of war, and that's great. That's a great way to tell a war story. But unlike the documentary you're talking about, the what's it called? They
Will Not Grow Old.
They Will Not Grow Old is it's very serious. Adam Scott shows up to give us a little bit of the absurdist clown of war, a guy who's only adapted to the madness by becoming a bit touched himself.
Andrew Scott. Let's just make sure.
Sorry, Andrew Scott.
Adam Scott would also be doing this part. But
if it were about Americans and not British people, it would have been Adam Scott.
Absolutely, but this is
Andrew Scott. Sorry. You get a taste of it anyway, is what I'm saying. But even that isn't what Joel's talking about. It's always amazing to hear a veteran or whatever tell their story, or to see them living their normal lives, because they were normal people. This film is about heroism above and beyond the call of what is reasonable. It is a heightened, amazing film. The conceit is that it is all done, the entire 2 hours and 10 minutes is all done in one continuous, uninterrupted shot. Joel and I have talked about the value of the uninterrupted shot before. This film brings that to bear on the immediacy of the story, which is great. It is incredibly well, recreated. Sam Mendes, who had an idea and sort of mapped out the story, got with a writer where they truly collaborated into making it a human story and making it, a mission story. It's really, really strong. Of all the films released that year, it is the best made film, I will say. I think it's
Sure.
easy to
Yeah.
say that.
Mhm.
You know, in past years, I've gone with the more emotional film. Whatever gets to my emotions, I value that so much as a sort of insular and kind of lone wolf of a person, when I can sit down and watch something and feel connected to real people. And I just feel like that's where all the value goes. But looking back at a few Oscars ago, I picked Call Me by My Name, or Call You by Your Name, or Call Me by Your
Call
Name.
Call Me by Your Name.
Call Me by Your Name. Sorry, that's a little.
Yeah.
I picked that as sort of best movie because emotionally I just was taken on a ride in that film. I really thought it was amazing. But looking back on that year now, with 2 years or 3 years of distance, I would pick probably Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, because I think that's the best told, kind of most amazing, most original story of that year. We may look back on 1917 and we probably won't. We'll tell you why in a moment. But we may look back on it and say that about it. Look at it.
Right.
Look at what it is. Look at what they did. Wow. Right. Is that kind of your reaction to it too?
Yeah. I mean, the continuous take, that in that real time, that, mapping of real time, the camera choreography from a technical standpoint is
Stunning.
tremendous. The things that happen that you don't see, some of the very deliberate things that happen that happen off, and the camera is pointed somewhere else, whether it's
Right.
it's very interesting, again showing sort of the madness of this war, and
Definitely pulls that off for sure.
and yeah, I mean, it was great. It was actually almost jarring when you had the sort of the celebrity actors.
Yeah. Not so much at the beginning with Colin Firth and stuff, but at the end when Cumberbatch shows up, you're like,
they go. You're doing this whole thing. I mean, even Andrew Scott, and that scene with Andrew Scott is,
although that's early enough,
great,
that, again,
and that's early.
okay.
Then you're going along, and then suddenly Mark Strong is there.
Yeah, Mark Strong, Benedict Cumberbatch. You'd have done better to have David Morrison and Ian Hart and guys who could have played those roles that aren't movie stars, honestly.
Yeah.
Mark Strong, I'll look the other way. And Cumberbatch is perfect and he's great in it.
Yeah,
but we've seen
and that's what I was
him
gonna
play
say.
the same character in War Horse, and we've seen him play the same character here and there, and it's kind of like, like it or not, he's a superstar. He doesn't disappear into us anymore.
Yeah. And and I love Mark Strong, and so maybe others don't necessarily know who Mark Strong is, but he's definitely one of those actors.
He's on the fence,
Yeah,
I get it. He's super recognizable. He has baggage that he brings with him. With him though, I'm like, let's not take work away from Mark Strong. Well, Benedict Cumberbatch, on the other hand, he doesn't need our help.
Yeah, the moment where Benedict Cumberbatch,
he'll be all right.
That's definitely the guy you're looking for. That's
right.
That's the man. He's not going to pass you off to somebody else.
Right, exactly.
And so
not bad casting at all. It's just I agree.
And I mean, so yeah, there's so much of it that was good, and there's an element of oh my God, what else could possibly happen in this 2-hour real-time thing?
Yeah, most of it goes pretty good and flows pretty organically, but some of it is just like, you got to be kidding me. Yeah. And that's just the nature of the beast with this kind of movie. I mean, it's like a TV show that goes on for too long, where you're just like, I don't believe it anymore, and some of that is in there. There's no doubt. I'll get to the next movie. We're again, just in terms of saving time, my favorite movie was like those years ago I was talking about. Instead of the technical marvel, which I really liked, it was the emotional roller coaster that I really embraced, and that's Noah Baumbach's A Marriage Story. if I have to pick a film that wins Oscar for that year, I'm going to pick that movie because I just think for a well-told story and a well-written story, the truth is in it in every scene, and I just feel like to tell a story like that in a way that makes a great movie and also feels believable and true, and people feel flawed and real despite how articulate and brilliant they all are. You know what I mean? Like getting that balance right is a miracle. And no film made me feel more for a group of people than in some time than A Marriage Story did. That said, I don't know that it's worthy of deep analysis. I'll just tell you what I told Joel when recommending it, that it's a sad story. It's cruelly called A Marriage Story. It should be called a divorce story. That's what it is.
Sure, yeah.
It's a story of a divorce. And a divorce is a story of a marriage to some degree, so I get it. I'm not trying to be cute, but it's a story of a divorce, and divorces are hell, and it all comes from a very real place. The inspiration for all of it, the details, even the movie star cameos, which seem to harm 1917 somewhat, don't put a dent in A Marriage Story somehow. I don't know why, but
another one of the things I appreciated about it is we didn't have to there were no, like, very, very, very rarely were these moments of flashback where you saw how good things were,
right,
to try to make those sad moments even sadder.
Right. There's some of that jumping around in time, but it's not used as a gimmick at all. It's all to inform you of what you're watching in the present of the film. And even there's at the very end, at the very, very end in particular, but throughout there are these neat reversals, neat ways that your heart is tugged on in different ways that you weren't even aware of what you were seeing. And that the lesson of whose perspective all this is happening from is important. And it's an important part of why a divorce goes the way it goes, is two sides to every story. It really is the case of that. I thought it was just wonderful. I thought Johansson was fantastic, and I thought Adam Driver was as good as I've ever seen him in anything, and he's as good as there is on the planet, and I just was blown away by him.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
It's Baumbach's take on divorce and the human things, and the way you can overcome some of the pitfalls if you just make the right decision at the right time. That I was uplifted by that. And it is not an uplifting movie, but I was encouraged by that personally. So I loved A Marriage Story, and that would be my pick. And Joel's pick is
well, real quick, just going back on Marriage Story, I feel the way you do on a lot of these things, but for me, were this not an Academy Award nominated film, I probably would never see it, just
because you just would have avoided it.
I don't watching love fall apart.
It's tough.
Is not something that I want to spend my free time doing.
It's tough, and you're the married one amongst us.
Yeah, and
it's not. It's got plenty of laughs and is funny in a way that our lives are funny. But it is that.
And one thing, I appreciate. I did also appreciate that both of them are doing what they believe is the best job they can do to be the best parent they can be throughout this whole thing.
Right. Two sides to every story, right? This proves it, that there's validity to that. I like that of it.
So my pick for my Altsker is the last movie we have remaining on the
last
list.
Movie nominated, also a Netflix movie, Marriage Story, Two Popes,
and it's
this film.
It's a little, I don't,
movie that could.
Yeah, it's a little movie that could, with this unknown director. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
And it's Martin Scorsese's The Irishman.
Yes.
And and again, this one, there's not a lot to say about it other than it's just a really solid. It's
for a film that's as huge and complicated and everything,
Mhm.
multi-generational, biographical, fantastical. There isn't a lot to say about it because it like a lot of Scorsese's best stuff, that it's all in the telling, right? It's all in
Yeah.
it's all the two characters sitting across the table from each other, going at each other in whatever way. Joe Pesci came out of retirement to act in this movie and reminds us all what an incredible talent he is.
Yep.
Al Pacino, it's the best he's been in anything in forever. And Al
Oh, and
Pacino in a
totally
nice
playing it.
reversal.
I was gonna say, and totally playing into that almost parody of Al Pacino and his bigness and and it's like,
There's Al
well,
Pacino, the good actor, Al Pacino, the bad actor, and Al Pacino, the good actor, pretending to be Al Pacino, the bad actor. And this has some of the latter
Yeah.
category, definitely, because he's playing Jimmy Hoffa, and Jimmy Hoffa's a larger than life character.
figure, yeah.
But he finds the humanity in it,
Oh,
and
sure.
he's a fantastic. Al's not going off like he goes off in Dick Tracy or Scent of a Woman. He knows that he's a foil for our understated, quiet hero played by Robert De Niro.
Yeah.
Not even directly, really, but he knows that it's a contrast to that, and so it's this harmonious. The whole movie, really, every time two people are on screen, whether it's those three big guys I'm talking about, or Ray Romano, or the Harvey Keitel,
Yep.
the list goes on and on. Everyone is in this film. I didn't name any women.
there is that.
That was sort of by accident on my part, but the movie's still a Scorsese movie. There's women in it, but are they super important?
There's only
one of them, thankfully, by the end, kind of is important, but
there Anna Paquin is really the only
it's a very masculine mob story, but it's rooted in real life. It's rooted in this real testimonial of this guy who really is dismissed when we talk about him in real life as this mafia assassin. He was not even primarily that, and he was so much more than that. It's an interesting life.
Mm-hmm.
From an interesting guy who is never and was never at peace with himself, and that's interesting to me. It's Irishman's a really, really good movie. It's long, it's 3 hours and change.
It's long, but I will say, I mean, for me, as a testament, I started watching it with the intention of I just want to get like a good hour and a half in, and then I need to go to bed because it's getting late.
Yeah.
And then next thing I knew, it was like 2:30 in the morning, and the movie's done, and I'm like, oh my God, okay, all right, well, I'm gonna pay for this tomorrow. But boy, it had me, it sucked me in. So if I have to choose an alternate film,
well, that's what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
It really was a year where we didn't have to choose. Parasite, which we sort of breezed over at the beginning, was the best film of this year in so many ways, and it earned its Oscar. I'm not quite at peace with what Parasite is, because like all of Boone's films, it's tonally challenging in ways that make it hard for me to buy into what it's saying, but that's the way to tell an allegory.
Mm-hmm.
Is Snowpiercer as opposed to Jojo Rabbit is the way to tell an allegory. Sure, it's an allegory, it's cartoonish in the same way, but you can't watch Snowpiercer and not get what it's saying.
Yep.
It's single-minded in that way, that it's important that a satire and an allegory be that way. As a class, as a bit of class warfare, that's sort of with an emphasis on the warfare, which is weird because that's not really what real life is. But this is sort of like people's struggles and emotions manifesting itself in a story that, while it wouldn't exist in reality, it exists because our inner voices are creating it, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
our anxieties, our resentments, all of that is on screen and on display in that, without completely ignoring the human frailty.
Yeah.
It sidesteps it a lot, but it doesn't completely ignore it, which is why it's so powerful. And I don't even, not even getting into the conceit of what the plot of it is.
Right.
It just,
I love
it's powerful in a way that a straightforward story sometimes can't be.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved that it was, I loved the structure. I loved the pacing. I loved that it was challenging. The surprises were legitimate and earned. The plot twists were genuinely like just wonderful. Like, oh my God, I did not see that coming. And not in a far-fetched way.
Well, distinctly Asian in the way that it's plotted, and yet at the same time, it's universal.
Yeah.
Really, when you think about it, that's a powerful film, and that's probably the right pick because even with its imperfections, that film had this broad, incredible ambition, and it delivered it. When it wants to bring the hammer down on you, the audience member, you feel the full effect of it. A couple other films on our list where you can kind of say that, but this is the one that achieved that. So I would just encourage people, if they're watching it for the first time, I don't know.
Yeah,
you got to go about it one or two ways. One, try this way.
Sure.
It's not a puzzle to be figured out, even though it's confusing and weird. And even though it's not exactly believable, you really got to just let it wash over you the first time. I always recommend that for films. Don't try and figure them out or walk away with all of the discussion points ready. Your best move the first time you're watching a film is to let it wash over you.
Yeah.
And if it really does intrigue you and gives you a lot to think about it, then you get to revisit it and try and decode it a little bit.
Yep.
I strongly recommend that for this film.
And certainly
watch it however you watch stuff, but
certainly the most original movie, I think, of this group too.
Yeah, even making the same movie this is the 7th one, but so I wasn't as stunned by it, I think, as some folks, but it is. Compared to the rest of the field, it's its own thing in a striking way.
Yeah,
I agree.
So that's gonna do it for us on this the 2020 Altskers. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you disagree with us, if you want to tell us that we're morons for not loving Jojo Rabbit, you should absolutely feel free to do so, but be prepared to defend your work. But reach out to us on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan Facebook page, at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram. And if you are watching this on YouTube, you are at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on YouTube. Like and comment below. And also I hope you were, if you were listening to this or willing, please give it a share. Tell other people about it. We love to have some more listeners chime in.
Always.
Next week we begin another annual tradition here on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, where we try to recap as many films from 2020 as possible. We're going to do a year in review.
We won't dig into them quite as deep as we did today, but we'll throw a bunch out there, maybe a bunch you haven't seen, say enough about them so you can make your own decisions about them.
This is we are serving as the menu item. We are saying, here's what your choices are, and we hope that you find something.
And it's been a crazy year, so hopefully that'll be exciting and useful. That's the plan.
So that is next week. Until then, we will say see you later. Thank you all so much for joining us.
We love all you guys equally.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.